Hello and welcome to Coffee with Carey. I appreciate you being here today, stopping by to chat a little bit. Today is dating advice. If you're new here, I'm a matchmaker and a dating coach in the Chicago area, which is why we talk about a lot of the things that I talk about with clients here. Today for you, I was thinking there are a lot of rules people set up for themselves that might seem like good things to have a list, have some rules to abide by before picking out who you're going to date or to know what you're looking for. But sometimes it's counterintuitive or counterproductive even. And that's what I want to talk about today. Rules that you may set up for yourself that aren't going to help you out. If that's interesting, keep watching. That's what we're talking about. So I think we're going to approach this from the 5 common rules that I run into. And the first one would have to be height. I know there are a lot of gals out there who have very specific thoughts on the height they need their partner to be or the men they want to date in general. Before even meeting anybody, they want to know how tall he is. And everybody's different. You probably know a lot of women. You may be one who wants somebody tall. I have conversations with some of my gals who are very close to 5 feet tall, 5'1", 5'2", 5 feet. And they say they want somebody 6 feet tall. And I say, please, leave those 6 feet men for my girls who are 5'10" and 5'11". You don't need somebody a full foot taller than you. But that's what they like, right? And so I ask that question, why do you need somebody that much taller than you? And sometimes it's because they want to feel small, right? They just want to feel petite and feminine and bring out that side of themselves. So we compromise, and I urge you to think about this as well. If you're one of those gals who has a rule about fellas being very tall, that would it perhaps suffice if he wasn't quite as tall, but maybe he was a little broader in the shoulders so you could still feel smaller and feminine? So it's something to think about. But you're cutting out a lot of great men. Whatever that 1 inch is below that cutoff point you have, guaranteeing you there's tons of great guys that height who would be a perfectly acceptable match for you and nail it in all other departments except for that little bit of height. So think about those height requirements. A lot of times my gals are biting off their nose to spite their face with their height rules. Not a great rule to have if you're really serious about finding somebody. And I don't want you to think this is always women looking for somebody who's tall. I had a client who said, I want somebody who's my height or maybe 1 inch taller than me. I was like, oh, it's interesting. Why? She said, I just want when we are barefoot, I want us to be face to face, eye to eye, so we can just kiss easily and we're the same. Interesting. What if he were 3 inches taller? What if he was an inch shorter? Just never like to narrow things down. I like to cast a wider net and then narrow it down by qualities that are more having to do with your compatibility as opposed to a prerequisite of a number, because attraction can always surprise you. That's the thing I've learned throughout my years being a matchmaker. People have these rules, but then I say, let's stretch outside your comfort zone and just meet this guy because he has so much going for him. Or I know this gal is a little bit different than these rules you've set for me, but there's so much to recommend her. Just meet her for a glass of wine. And great connections have been made when people push themselves outside their boundaries. So if height is one of yours, you may want to look at that a little more closely and see if that's really all that important to you. The number 2 rule that people set for themselves are age parameters. And I know if you're on any of the dating apps, they force you into that because they have to have something to go off of. So people are used to giving a bottom number and a top number, which help them derive the age parameter that they are looking for. But I encourage you to go as wide in both directions as you can, because the same way that height, you said your limit is a guy who's 5'10", and there are all these great guys that I know I could set you up with that are 5'9". Is that 1 inch really? So is that 1 year really a big deal? And I encourage you to do it not just in one direction. If you are typically a person who enjoys men who are older, then go 1 year or a couple years younger than you. If you're a woman who thinks that you have to have a guy that's a couple years younger than you because you're so young and active, I guarantee you there are tons of men who are a few years, 5 years, 7 years older than you who are telling me they need somebody who is super active and still fit and with it. Everybody's saying the same things to me. They all want somebody who is like them, and it comes in all different packages and ages. So don't limit yourself by making yourself a rule about age. It's a case-by-case basis, I think. Got to know the person first. And if you meet them in person, you're more likely to be able to overlook a year or an inch. So that's where we end up here with the age and height rules. The third rule that I keep bumping into with the gals and fellas that I'm working with is that they set a rule around whether or not the other person has been married. And I'm talking about people in their 40s and 50s now. I mean, this channel is for women in their 50s, so I am tailoring this information to you, although I'm sure it's probably some of it is beneficial to people dating at any age. But a lot of times my gals in their 50s and 40s will say, I definitely want somebody else who's been married. If they've never been married, that's a red flag for me. And I think, what's it a red flag for? I understand where they're coming from. They feel that they want somebody who's learned how to negotiate and compromise and has shown that they can navigate their way through a relationship. But the point is, they're single now. So at some point they weren't navigating or negotiating or compromising as well as perhaps they could have. So the fact that they've been in a marriage before like you have and you have that in common, I'm not sure that's as important as putting a rule around it would indicate. Also, they think that perhaps somebody's commitment phobic. A lot of women think that the guy's commitment phobic if he's made it to 50 or 45 and never been married. But I've met tons of guys in their 50s who were really busy creating a great career for themselves and just never prioritized their social life. I mean, they had great friends, but they didn't prioritize that romantic part of their life. Or they had a relationship in their 30s and they got really close, but something went wrong, or she changed her mind and then he needed a few years to mend his broken heart, and by then everybody was married, so he's back to like playing the field again. There are other people who, instead of getting married, lived with somebody for years and then they ended up splitting up for some reason, the same as would have happened with a divorce. They never got that piece of paper, but they certainly have the experience of being in a long-term relationship. Lots of different reasons. Some of those people have children from that relationship. There just wasn't a marriage license in the drawer. So keep that in mind when you're setting your rules around who you're willing to meet. Number 4 has to do with children. I have clients who say both, I want somebody who doesn't already have children, and or they say, I would definitely want somebody who has had children so that they can understand how important my children are to me, and they will have children of their own so they can relate to that. And I think a lot of people think that somebody who doesn't have kids won't understand that sometimes they're not going to be the priority if your children need you. And I've met so many people who don't have children of their own who are perfectly capable of understanding that parenting is a full-time job. They were, in fact, actually had parents. That may have helped them a little bit. I don't think a person has to have had children to know what your children mean to you, if in fact you're finding somebody who has empathy. So empathy might be important. That might be a great role, somebody who has empathy. But somebody who has had children so that being in their 50s they can relate. I have a lot of people that I can think of who have never had children who are looking for a partner who does, so that they can enjoy those years of having grandchildren with somebody else because they didn't have children, be it a partner who couldn't or didn't want to, or because they've never been married, as in my last rule that we are trying to be broad-minded about. All of these things so far, really kind of a case-by-case basis. There are reasons, good, logical reasons that people have. And if you're setting up arbitrary rules around them, you may be doing yourself a disservice of meeting somebody great. And I still have one more rule. Oh, let's finish up. People who want somebody who has not had children. If you are in your 30s and you want to have children, there are a lot of women who will say, or men, who say, I don't want to meet somebody who already has kids. I want to do that for the first time with a partner. And while I completely understand that, I have seen people say that and then meet somebody who has one child perhaps and gone on to be a great role model in that child's life. I think the more important part of that conversation is what type of a relationship the two parents have with one another. Because if you can just be an extra loving person in a child's life who has two loving parents who get along, I don't know where the negative is to your partner having had a child before. If you've never had a child, maybe you can't even envision the fact that having another one, that child's going to be as loved, as important, and a brand new experience that your partner will have never had before with another parent. It's yours to share together an experience. I'm not telling anybody what they should or shouldn't want. I'm just saying think it through to make sure that your rules really make sense for you. And I have one more for you. Number 5. Number 5 is very, very broad. And that is that people will tell me that they have a type. While it may be true that they seem to be attracted to the same type over and over again, tall, dark, and handsome, or somebody who is blonde and curvy, or whatever their thing is. I have seen way too many people end up with people who are the exact opposite of their type and who seem to be living happily ever after, navigating a long-term relationship and or marriage, or living together, some of them. But if you think you have a type, maybe examine that and even perhaps name some of the celebrities that you think are attractive and see if they all fall into a category. One thing that I think is very interesting, and it may be more helpful than a type, I discovered that I think some people are attracted to the same face shape over and over again. Whether it be a long, thinner face or a more round face or certain jaw lines or cheekbones or the broadness of a nose, the ratios of a forehead. Take a look at the people that you've been in relationships with before and see if there is something that they have in common with face shape. Maybe that's something you could put a rule around. No, it's not necessarily a rule. Don't make any more rules than you have to. But maybe just when you're swiping, even if you're on the dating apps, you'll notice that you swipe the same face shape over and over. It's just something interesting I noticed, and I thought I'd share it with you. I think to wrap up this 5 rules that you can make that aren't helping you is that these are all individual people with different characteristics coming from different life experiences, looking for different things. And the fewer rules you can set up for yourself that need to be broken in order to meet somebody, the better off. Because there are just lots of rules that have been broken where people are happy together. And I don't think 1 inch or 1 year or 3 inches or 3 years or a child or 3, it's happened, are going to make the big difference when you find somebody that you really connect with and have that bond. You have a chemistry, you have common values and an overlap in interests. All that other stuff just goes out the window. So keep that in mind when you're meeting new people. If you found this interesting, give it a thumbs up. I hope you will subscribe to my channel so that we can chat again sometime. Ring that bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. I appreciate you being here, and I will look forward to the next time. Until then, have a good one.